I didn't think I'd ever be able to tell anybody or my peers or that I'm grateful for having spent 3 years in prison. I don't recommend it at all, but I'm really grateful for it because it gave me everything. And that's perspective. So that's why I don't have any shame about it at all. You are not the worst thing you've done. You are the sum of all life's parts. And most of my parts are built around love and understanding and people that mean things to me.
Welcome back or welcome to Y Option. I'm your host, Yogi Roth, as always joined by co-founder Jim Thornby. We were just there as in Indy, and now we are here back in our studio. The CFP, the college football playoff is set. The Heisman is almost here, and with that, we welcome a phenomenal guest, close friend, and Heisman finalist from 1997. That's right, the CW and many other things own Ryan Leaf. Jim, it's good to see you. I feel like I just saw you. I got about 6 hours of sleep, maybe total, in the last couple of days. I'm curious, did you finally get some after getting home from a wacky and wild day? Sounds from your travels.
I spent a lot of time in the Phoenix airport yesterday on my connection. I'll just say
more time in the airport than sleeping in Indianapolis.
Not quite, but
okay, close.
I mean, ballpark.
Competition.
At least the second night. Yeah. Because getting back, the game was going till, we didn't get back from the stadium till like 1:00, but it was a fun trip. It was funny because we do this, twice a week, and between that and everything else, we actually hadn't seen each other in person since the Big 12 Pac-12 media days this summer. So that's
crazy.
It is, because you don't really process it in the same way, because we're just it's been a full sprint this whole time. And same with seeing Ashley Adamson there this weekend too. We were trying to figure out, think we hadn't seen each other since the Pac-12 basketball tournament in March. So it's just because everybody has been full sprint with their new opportunities since the Pac-12 had the major shakeup at the end of the year, or at the end of May there. So I think everybody's just trying to, right now, I think is a time where everybody's about ready to catch a breath. So,
amen. Well, we will catch ours next week. We will continue to sprint forward this week, fighting through it on cup of coffee number 1. You're probably on 2 right around now, if I know you well enough.
Number 2 is on standby. Number
2 is on standby.
As soon as this is done, number 2 is going right into the veins.
Oh, I hear you. Next week, I might just try to not have any the whole week. But anyway, we'll get to next week.
Ready, set. Use French fries to go. Yeah, oil from French fries. Turn yesterday's leftovers into today's fuel. More power, lower emissions. 76 renewable diesel fuels all the ways you go, go, go.
With that being said, we got to hang out with one of our favorite people in today's conversation. It's always brought to you by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. And it's Heisman week. So we need to bring back one of the most intriguing players and most gifted players in the history of college football, and someone who was also at the Heisman Trophy ceremony in 1997, next to the likes of Peyton Manning, Charles Woodson, and Randy Moss. It's a beautiful documentary about all of them and that year at the Heisman. You check it out on ESPN. But with that, we also had a great conversation with Ryan Leaf about his time with the Cougs and the Beavs, because he called games all year long for the CW alongside our beloved people in Ted Robinson, Michael Molinari, and Nigel Burton, alums of this podcast as well, and also dove into some of his story, because it's a powerful and meaningful one. So let's get out of the way. Enjoy on your Heisman week. Not a lot of college football this week, so take some time, maybe gain some perspective, and listen to Ryan Leaf. This is so good. As we referenced, introducing our guest today, it is brought to you by our founding partner, 76, but it is one of my founding friends here on the West Coast in college football and really all things life. It is Ryan Leaf. Ryan, I'm such a fan of you as a human. we have so many things where we could talk about, but first, like, how are you? Is holiday season? How are those two wonderful kids and that family of yours doing?
Dude, it's good to see you. I miss the people on the West Coast. I love the East Coast in terms of where we get to live now and stuff like that. But they're great. Kid's 7, MacGyver's 7, Bo just turned 1, Anna's wonderful. So yeah, it's pretty grateful life here, bro.
Amen. I feel like, just to give people some background, you and I have known each other for a long time, but it was probably like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, where I'm in Indonesia getting married. You're in Indonesia with your wife, and we start like really probably communicating a ton. And
Yeah,
we
it took us to go to Bali to do that. Yes.
Totally. So we need to do it. Like, we plan on going for our 10-year anniversary. So you will be counted already. Like, if you want to come, it's just going to be a free for all. Anybody who wants to come over.
Yeah, I know my wife's in on that. I mean, we loved Bali, as you know. It's amazing. And so, yeah, I for sure tell you she's in on that, man.
I love it. All right. So we're in on all things college football through the lens of the West Coast. You have been basically on the West Coast all season long, flying from where you live on the East Coast out to either Pullman or Corvallis. You and Ted Robinson and Nigel Burton has just been one of the more enjoyable things I always listen to on my flight home. I'd be coming from the East Coast while you've been on the West Coast all season. But we got a lot to talk about today, right? It's Heisman week. I want to hear about your experience there. But let's start with your experience with the Cougs and Beavs. Last time we saw each other in person, it was in Las Vegas. And it was media day, basically. It was a night with the Cougs and the Beavs in Las Vegas. You were one of the honorary guests alongside some other great Cougs and Beavs. And at the time, you didn't even know if you were going to be calling their games. And now here you go. You just completed your season on the CW with, as I referenced, Ted, who's just changed my life, and Nigel's a dear friend. I'm just curious, what was the experience like for you in this very unique year in Washington State and Oregon State athletics?
It revitalized my love for calling football games. I knew that I liked it. Don't get me wrong. But working at ESPN the last few years, it was tough. It just was. I didn't like the way the leadership was working. I didn't like how I was never produced, and I want to get better at this if I'm going to do something. And so when you did see me in Vegas, I had said, I don't think I'm interested in traveling 12, 16 hours a weekend to do this. And then they came back to me right before the season started, after some of my, I think, heartfelt things I said at the night with Cougs and Beavs. And my wife sat me down, and she's usually the right one in all of our conversations. And she had an understanding of what the CW was going to bring to these two teams this year. And it was going to bring national attention, because guess what? People were going to watch it because it's a national network channel. She was right. Almost 1 million viewers watched the Oregon State Washington State game. And so again, I give her, her flowers. She's usually right. And also, to what you fully understand, is to work with the legend of Ted Robinson. I mean, he made me so much better this year. And I had this revitalization, and I was just like, God, I love doing this. I forgot how much I love to do this. And to watch the Washington State teams and Oregon State teams and the fan bases get so behind these two teams going through adversity, to see the Pac-12 conference actually have their back, build the brand, add teams, and to watch it play out the way it did. It ended disappointingly for the Cougs with 3 consecutive losses, but it was special to be a part of, again, to be 8-4, to watch Oregon State in that game. I mean, as a Coug, of course, you feel differently, but as a guy calling the football game that night, what a game we got to call. That was pretty special.
Yeah, you absolutely nailed that. I want to get to the Pac-12 in a minute, but I do think for the broadcasters listening, or people that love the craft, Ted Robinson, you referenced the impact he had. You talked about being produced. Michael Molinari is overseeing all things of the Pac-12. He's been my producer for almost a decade. Those two guys have changed my life. Ted, of course, and Michael on the broadcast side, but also as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as a colleague. For you, is there something you put your finger on of like, this is where both Ted and Michael or Nigel, like this is where they made my craft even sharper?
Well, it was nice to have Nigel on the sideline because, he sees it from a coach's point of view, especially from the defensive side of the football. And so when I saw something maybe that I could not necessarily articulate as good to the audience about a defensive pressure or the way they went about making a stop, it was so great to have access to him. We opened his mic and I could just go and ask Nigel a question. And Ted encouraged me to do that. So, for any of you guys who work in the field, play-by-play guys are sacred. They are the ones that have control of the module. They're the ones that tell you what's going on at all times. You never really want to step on their toes. And so to be allowed access to that, it's like, hey, any moment you have a chance to if you want to ask Nigel a question, it's free reign for you. And that was meaningful to me. And then just, I think I just think his ability to call the football game. Like it didn't matter if there was a blowout or not. That's what calling games for me is. You tell these great stories, yet if it's 40-10 and the third string quarterback's in, I'm still calling the football. He's still calling what the situation is, what the play is, and I'm telling everybody at home who's watching what just happened. And I think that's important for the third string guy who, when he gets in, doesn't want to have some story necessarily being told about another guy, but rather what they did on their play, because this may be their only chance to play all year and their parents are at home watching. So he was very adamant about that aspect of things, of telling the right story of the right football game at the time. And he makes it so easy because you don't realize, I feel like I talk all game and then I listen to the game back and I'm like, oh, I really don't say much because he's doing it perfectly and setting me up for every opportunity. And when I do say something, it sounds pretty important. So he makes me look really good.
Yeah, I've always felt that, and even now, this is my first year without Ted and Michael. I was with our good friend Guy Haberman, but I always have them in my ear, especially Ted, because he'd always be like, call the game, right? Like you and I are similar in terms of how we prepare maniacally. You can sit in your office, and by the way, you have a beautiful new setup. We're fired up to be the first person to be on that setup, right, and share it with the world. But I'd study and study and study and study, and then he'd always remind me, hey, the game will tell the story. And I think there's something beautiful to that for every broadcaster, especially early in your career, because often we want to prove that we've got it nailed. But really, you have to be confident of like, whatever will come, will come. And I think that has always been in the back of my mind as I've called games away from he and Michael. And I think the second thing is the economy of words. Like the best play-by-play, Guy does it, Ted is elite at it, it's like a quarterback, right? See a lot, see a little, see a little, see a lot. Like it's the same thing. Like say a little and like a lot is heard. And I love that from him and Michael and just how they train me.
And then being produced by Michael and from Jason Wormser at CW, like, Ryan, we don't pay you by the word. I think that was a really important aspect of things too, right? We don't pay you by the word. So, you don't have to talk a bunch. And that made me happy. I called the Thanksgiving Day game with Jason Benetti the other day. He's another guy that's exactly like that. I mean, the way he can describe a football game, and then I can just kind of mosey on in and out and just kind of give the rundown of what happened. And I mean, it's pretty special.
Pretty special.
You and I have gotten to work with and get to work with pretty special people, and I think that's we're lucky guys for that.
Yeah, no doubt indeed. Okay, so you were, I thought, really lucky because I watched I go back to the first game you guys called, and I could see you in your polos doing the open, and I can remember like Teresa Gould eventually coming on to the CW, and it was like, okay, we got two teams. And then you lived a growth of a league in real time. Like we've seen realignment in June, right? We've seen it shock us in July or in August of 2022 or whatever it was, 23, regardless of those memories. For you, what was it like to live in real time as a conference was bolstered by now a team who has a first round bye in Boise State? I got to imagine it was just kind of a unique experience, one of hopefully one in all of our careers.
Well, usually I'm pretty, broad strokes of everything that's going on in college football. I really had no interest in anything else other than the Pac-12. what was going on with Oregon State and Washington State. Now, I called a couple other Oregon games for Westwood One, so I called the Michigan-Oregon game, so I had to kind of keep abreast of everything that's going on. Pretty easy when Oregon's the number one ranked team in the country, and then I had the Civil War between Oregon State and Oregon too. My focus was there. So I got to really kind of just be invested in that. So every single step along the way, what Teresa Gould did in terms of announcing the teams that were going to come in and resupplement the Pac-12 conference, how that would lead to what the college football playoff format looks like now, and how the top 5 conferences go and get a automatic bid. Now, the 5th team may end up as the 12 seed, but listen, if you're Washington State, if you're Oregon State, if you're Boise State playing in a branded conference of the Pac-12, you just went from middle of the road of your conference and put yourself in the forefront of playing for a college football playoff every single year because of what Teresa Gould has done. Now we have to add one more team to make it eligible for the college football playoff. But I just think that along the way, we saw this growth by the teams, by people at the top, until we got to the end of the year and we had really competitive football. I mean, that Washington State-Oregon State game was incredibly competitive. The Boise State-Oregon State game was incredibly competitive for a team that's got to bye in the college football playoff, who's going to be a part of the Pac-12 conference. So I enjoyed every minute of it, and maybe there's some bias to it, but I really have been a bit disillusioned with the rest of college football. I likened it to minor league baseball the other day. Like, guys are getting paid a lot of money now, but I want to see Juan Soto as a Met. I don't want to see him at AAA. And it's kind of gave me that feeling. We'll see. We'll see what the playoffs games are like, the bowl games are like. But knowing that Washington State and Oregon State are going to have a shot at that each and every year because of how they stayed and kept that brand, I think that goes a long way for those who are continuing to and want to be fans of the Pac-12 conference.
Yeah, no, how it's all shook out from a year ago is absolutely fascinating. I hope somebody is doing a documentary on it because it's got a ton of detail and juice to it. Speaking of documentaries, you were part of a documentary once. 1997, let's rewind it all the way back because Jim Thornby, producer and co-founder of Y Option, myself, we're heading out to New York. I've covered the Heisman probably over 10 times in my career. Been there with winners like Marcus Mariota, been there with losers.
And you're a voter.
Yeah, and a voter like Christian McCaffrey. Are you a voter?
I'm not a voter.
Okay, you're not a voter. Okay, so I have a couple questions.
I think if I would have won it, I would have been a voter.
You get an automatic voter. I think anybody who is, I think 935 voters per my last check. I think if you get an invite to New York City, you should be a voter. I really do, because out of the 935, I don't know more than 100. So I wonder
if that would have been the case. I wonder if they would have sent my ballot to the prison I was sitting in and still would have got to vote. That would have been pretty good.
That would have been pretty cool. That would have
been pretty good, right?
You would have been the more popular guy.
Guys are outside. Go, what are you doing? I'm voting on the Heisman winner. I'm going to go with this guy here.
Okay, so let's talk about that. I want to hear about, when did you find out you were going to New York? Like, did you know? Because we're recording this on a Monday, and by the time this episode airs, the announcement of the 3, 4, hopefully 5 players will have gotten their invites. How did it work for you back in the day?
I'm trying to think.
It was Bill Stevens. He did something. He didn't call you. He paid you.
It was Rod Commons at the time.
Oh, okay.
So we're going way back, bro. Right? This is probably when Bill Stevens is playing tennis or something like that. I don't know. I can't recall exactly how it played out. I don't think I thought I wasn't going. So I mean, after the Apple Cup ended, and I saw kind of the push of what our university was doing. This is a I think it's kind of a well-kept secret, and it shouldn't be. It's one of the greatest, I think, Heisman campaigns that existed. I came into the office like late October, and on top of the all the secretaries' desks were just a pile of leaves, like real leaves that have fallen off the trees outside, and they were just stuffing them in envelopes to send to the voters. So when the voters opened up the envelope, it was a single leaf in it, just like that. And I thought it was genius. Well, it turns out it wasn't really genius, because Coach Price told me the story. He said, Ryan, your freshman year when we were struggling on offense so much, I got a letter and there was just a leaf in it. And he always said that, I wonder if your mom sent me that letter. And I said, I don't think she sent you that letter, but that's where he got the idea for the Heisman campaign. So I kind of knew, and I don't know if it was announced, but we got to go down to the college football award show, which was in Orlando at the time. And just before we left, they told us that I had to get a plane ticket to New York right after that, the next night. So I think that's when I found out. And that meant I needed to get another suit. So mom had drove over across to Spokane. I didn't, as a kid, you don't know. And that's the best thing about what your parents do. They kind of shield you from that stuff. You didn't know that they're kind of living paycheck to paycheck, or just, had a budget for this much for you to, and then them to go outside of that. They bought me a video camera so I could document all the stuff, because they knew I was going to go to that award show, and then I was going to have to go to New York for the Heisman Trophy. And so I was psyched. First Cougar to ever go, only Cougar to ever go, in fact, to represent my school. Coach Price was about to come with me and win the Eddie Robinson Award down in Orlando, and then come up and be a part of the Heisman night again. So, I mean, it's to this day, Yogi, it's the greatest night that like football celebrity or anything ever gave me, because of what it meant to me, my family, and then of course the university I got to represent.
So you and I have one thing in common when it comes to the Heisman. We both attended it pre-social media. I was there when Reggie Bush won it with Matt Leinart. It was epic. I mean, it was all time. And like, I got to go into the room with all the Heisman winners. It was very cool and behind the scenes. For you, you're there with Peyton Manning, Charles Woodson. Curious, did you think you had a shot? And then what is it like rubbing elbows and going through that experience with those two other individuals and having that common experience in a city? I'm going to go on a limb you've never been to prior to that?
Nope, I'd never been to New York prior to that. Randy Moss too.
Yeah, there you go. Forgot about that.
3 Pro Football Hall of Famers. And no, I didn't think I was going to win. I believe Peyton Manning had this wrapped up all in a tight little bow. And so, my family and I went, and we didn't really expect anything. We just were there to have fun. And I think that's why it was such a great experience for me, because I got to go out and do some real fun things too. Now, don't get me wrong. I would have loved to win the award, but Charles had to stay there and do media and everything like that. Peyton and his family, I think they had anticipated it. And there was rumblings that they had rented out like a restaurant for everybody to go celebrate at. And Randy, unfortunately, was having a really hard time. Randy was having a panic attack. We know that now, and he wouldn't take his glasses off. He was so worried about them drudging up his past, that and kind of an imposter syndrome, that he really struggled with it. And I wish I would have known what I know now. I would have loved to have been like more of a support for him that night. But I tell you what, buddy, I was just enjoying it. Every single minute of it. As soon as that thing got done, me and Coach Price went to Saturday Night Live. Helen Hunt hosted. Jack Nicholson showed up for a cameo. Didn't know this at the time. Sat with Lorne Michaels at a Yankees game the other day. Jack Nicholson's never hosted the show, never been on the show. It's the only show he's ever even showed up for. Was the night me and Coach Price went to that. After that, we went to the Town Crier, which is his bar that was friendly with the Downtown Athletic Club. And don't forget, this was pre-9/11. So this was the Downtown Athletic Club, like the old historical tiny rooms, things like that. All the former winners were there, all like the ESPN personalities. And there I'm at the bar with my pops, and I'm all of a sudden behind the bar bartending with Gino Torretta until like, I don't know, 2 or 3 in the morning. And it's so great. But this is even better. I look up, and my dad, who's like 48 years old, which is how old I am now. And I thought at the time he was so old, right? So such an old dude. He's gone. Like, I don't know where he's at. Now we're in New York. We're two of these kind of, hillbillies from Montana. I'm like, somebody's abducted him. What's going on here? And we, I come waltzing back into the Downtown Athletic Club about, I don't know, 4 or 5 in the morning. And they're all a bunch of the former winners. I mean, we're going back to the 60s, Notre Dame, and the 70s and 80s, and all these guys, Tony Dorsett, and around the piano, and they're playing the piano and playing fight songs and then doing karaoke. And then right in the middle of them all is John Leaf. Like, he left with all these guys. And he's right in the middle of them, just singing up a storm. And I'm going to tell you right now, Yogi, it's the single greatest thing that the Heisman Trophy gave me was to see my dad get to experience that night with his heroes. Still to this day, I will never give up anything that happened football-wise, what it ended up looking like ever, because of that night. It's my favorite night. We represented Washington State. My dad got the best night in the world, as did I.
I just have chills. I have visions, and I what you like. He was 48, and here you are 48. Like, oh my God.
How cool would it be if my kid right now was up for the Heisman Trophy? I'd be like,
totally.
That's pretty cool. You know?
And like, would you in this era be like, yo, I'm going to go roll with Barry Sanders and like hang out with guys from back in the day all night?
I mean, especially for a guy that's just an insurance salesman from Great Falls, Montana, that did 2 tours in Vietnam and was like, this is what he grew up with. It's like, there's Johnny Rogers and, Archie Griffin and all these guys that were there, like you talked about when you were there, and all the former winners, and but Dad just like, I think he probably had a couple beers, Yeah. My dad never really drinks either. He probably had a couple beers that came up, and his son served him a couple drinks, and he was just like, all right, ambitions a little bit. I mean, maybe I'll go over and talk to Archie Griffin. Maybe I'll say, hey, my son was up for the Heisman tonight. That's pretty cool.
Oh,
have a beer?
Man, that is so amazing. Okay, so what is it like? You're 5 a.m., you roll into the lobby, you see your dad singing with some greats in college football's past. What is it like when eventually, the craziness subsides? What is that next day like for somebody who doesn't win the Heisman?
I don't know, man. Like, it was just that season, that moment, it went on and on. Because guess what was next for us? To go to the Rose Bowl. And like, that was just the next step. Like, this was a dream. Like, when I decided to go there, like, none of that was a reality. Mike Price said it was. He said it was promised. But coaches say that all the time. And we were doing it. So when we got back from the Heisman, which was around, December 12th or something like that, we were off to Pasadena in a couple of weeks, like 10 days. We had to get to practice because now we were playing for the national championship of sorts, right? We win, Tennessee wins. There's a real good chance that we all 4 of us split the title, or I don't know how it would have worked back then. But so we wanted to go play. It was the number 1 team in the country we were going up against, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, and Charles Woodson. Like, this was important. So it was a locked in mentality when we got done. We compartmentalized those days. The College Football Playoff Award show, the Heisman Trophy ceremony, those were compartmentalized. We had fun with it. We did everything we could with it to celebrate each other and our families and our school and our friends and our teammates and everything like that. And then it was down to business.
My college roommate was Larry Fitzgerald. And I remember when he went to the Heisman and he didn't win. And we were all gutted for him. And I remember talking to him afterwards, and he had this awareness. His dad was a journalist, still is a journalist up in Minnesota. He grew up with Kirby Puckett and Chris Carter, and you referenced Randy Moss. And I remember being like, hey, man, congrats. Like, you took second. Like, it's still awesome. And he's like, dude, but if you win it, like, your life changes forever. And I'm 20 at the time, and I was like, whoa. Okay, maybe. Like, I had no awareness. Larry had unique awareness based on his experiences. Like, what was yours around life changing forever? And now, like 20-some years later, there's a whole film based on the 4 of you all in New York City.
I already felt like it was life changing, regardless if I won or not. But I get his point. Like, I mean, the Heisman House, all the things that go with it, regardless of anything, you were the Heisman Trophy winners. That is life-changing. And so it's made me reflect a little bit, coming from where I came from. No one does that. No one has ever been invited to New York who's from Montana. It's just, it's a goal I wrote down on a goal sheet when I was like 8 years old or something like that my dad kept. But I feel like kids do that all the time too. Unless the kid ultimately makes it, no one ever sees that list. Right. And so, I was on a ride, bro. And I was enjoying every single minute of it. Now, look at me 27 years later, and I think back and I think about how we've watched the Pac-12 get dismantled and how the bias exists. And then trying to rationalize around the idea of like, how did I not win the award? I led the nation in passing with Peyton Manning in the year that he played. I led a team that hadn't been to a Rose Bowl in 67 years to a Rose Bowl. You know, I probably deserved the award more than anybody in terms of you take me off that team. What is the difference if you take Peyton off the team? Well, you took Peyton off the team and Tennessee wins the national championship the next year.
Yeah.
You know, it's a real thing. And so that later in life, I thought about that thing. But during that time frame, man, I didn't think like I thought me being drafted first or second, that was going to be life-changing, you know? And it was for many different reasons. And it's still become and been very life-changing, but he's exactly right. If he would have been the Heisman Trophy winner, it is a completely life-changing scenario where you then are identified as something that just, you can count on, you know, a few hands, the guys really around that award. It's pretty special.
Yeah, it's a unique fraternity. Speaking of life-changing and changing, I'm a lukewarm fan of social media, but there's very few, I can count them on one hand, people who I have alerts for. And you're one of them. Because every time you say something, for the most part, you impact people in a really, I think, beautiful way, in a positive way. You sent out a note when we record this 6 days ago, and it was the 10-year anniversary. I don't know if you want to call it an anniversary, but it was 10 years ago to the day where you walked out of prison.
Yep.
And you've been so vocal about your story, about your path, whether that's tweeting about it or on social media or speaking about it. You've got this new podcast, which is really cool, where you elicit stories around people and how, you know, their lives have been changed. I'm just curious, as you reflect back on Heisman week and you think about your words, right? The hillbilly who parents were struggling, found you a new suit. You went to New York City. You bartend with Gino Torretta. You watch your dad at 4 or 5 a.m. singing with some of the greats in college football lore. And it was 10 years ago, almost to the day as we talk right now, Ryan, where you walked out of prison. What is perspective? What does that word say to you? And how does that land on you as you sit here today?
I love that word because that word is life-changing. Some people don't have perspective. They don't get it. And it's usually based around gratitude. Like I lay my head down every night and I love our bed. My wife, bless her heart, is probably sick and tired of me saying it. You know, I just crawl into bed and she just is, you know, it might have been a long day for her with the kids and stuff like that. And I'll just be like digging in going, I love this bed. I love our bed. And she goes, I get it. You love our bed. Like she's probably sick and tired of every night, but she doesn't have the perspective I do, where I slept on a steel slab for 3 years. So that is an amazing, grateful perspective that I have. I'm on the golf course and guys are complaining about a 5-hour round. And I just simply say like, you know, it could be worse. And they're like, how? And I'm like, well, you could be in prison. Like, I didn't think I'd ever be able to tell anybody or my peers or that I'm grateful for having spent 3 years in prison. You know, I don't recommend it at all, but I'm really grateful for it because it gave me everything. And that's perspective. So that's why I don't have any shame about it at all. You know, you are not the worst thing you've done. You are the sum of all life's parts. And most of my parts are built around love and understanding and people that mean things to me. And so that's what I choose to look at. I also choose to look at the things where I made poor choices and have taken accountability for them. And I think that's the biggest thing about perspective too. Like, you don't like me because of this, that, or the other in my past. I can't help you there. You know, I'm sorry you don't. Sounds like it's a you problem. I got me to worry about here, you know? And so that's, again, a perspective. I love that word. Perspective belongs to me in a way that defines me. And it makes it very special for me. And so a lot of gratitude, a lot of understanding. Ironically, I'm more confident as a human being now with all the baggage and the junk and the things because of that perspective than I ever was as a football player, which is when that started to become a real thing, to know that when I look at myself in the mirror and go, how is that possible? It was dumbfounding to me, because it just turns out a lot of that is just really false bravado. Very good athlete, right? Really good at playing football. Not great at being the guy when he steps off the field in life. And the fact that I've gotten to that place, when the College Football Hall of Fame called and said, you're on the ballot this year. If you look at the understanding of what the College Football Hall of Fame says, is of course you have to be a first-team All-American. How did I become a first-team All-American the year there was Peyton Manning? Somehow I did. So I'm on the ballot. But there's also a piece to it that says, what have you done off the field since you quit playing football? Like, there is a morality clause to it. And I remember sending it to my dad years ago going, well, I don't think this is in the cards. And he said, not yet. And so when they announced that I was on the ballot, I think that what that did to me is it made me understand that they were acknowledging the man, because the player probably deserved to be in the Hall of Fame a long time ago, and the man didn't. And when they put you on the ballot, they believe the man is ready. And that's really meaningful to me. And I think it means more to me because of that. So again, the word you used is perfect. Perspective is a huge part of how I live my life every single day.
I know you just improved everybody who's listening or watching this live just from that soundbite alone. Two more before we cut you loose here. It is, as an athlete now, a really unique time. You can call it a beautiful time, a fruitful time, a challenging time. One where, because of NIL, because of transferring, because of social media, I think that athletes oftentimes can be really conflicted around, so let's just use the word perspective. They can be sometimes feel as though they're in their own, call it virtual prison to a certain degree, where it's like, I have to be someone. People think I'm different than what I might be. And they have to navigate all those things. Whether it's going to be the Heisman this weekend, there's going to be a bunch of losers and one will win. Whether it's the draft, whether it's bowl season, whether it's transferring. I mean, there's so much that I think comes at an athlete that you thankfully never experienced, that I thankfully never experienced. I'm just curious what you might say to someone that might feel like, because I talk to quarterbacks all the time, man. They're like, oh, it's coming at me right now. Like, how do I navigate when I feel as though I'm stuck?
Yeah. So like you get the opportunity to reach these kids when they're much younger. And Nick Saban was the first coach to bring me in to speak to his team. Best referral you could ever have, because every coach goes, who does Coach Saban have coming in? So every year, about 5 teams or so have me in. So I have, a hands-on approach with these guys that are going exactly through your thing that you talked about. My message to them usually is around that stuff online. None of that's real. Okay. No one ever shows you the blemishes and the scars and the things that exist. That is not a real place. Where you are is where, and I use this from you all the time. The first time I ever called a game, you texted me and told me to be where my feet are. And I love that too. That is a grounding technique for me, to know where you are right now and how you can't control that. And there are things that I'm doing with my kid right now, who's 7 years old, around the things he can control, right? The only things he can control are his attitude, his behavior, and his effort. And so those are the little messages that you try to convey in those. Like, hey, can't control that. You can't control what that person says, thinks, does, anything. What you can control is how you behave, what your attitude is like, and how much effort you put into it. Those are the only 3 things. Coaches may not play you. You may be 3rd on the roster. All the things that exist. Those are the only 3 things you can control. Even if you put yourself in the portal and go somewhere else, and you feel like you have a semblance of control by doing that, you have no idea what that's going to look like, no matter what. So I just try to give them the best idea of what they can control and what is real at the moment, And, we're watching it play out at Washington State right now. You got 2 of your best players in Wayshawn Parker and John Mateer, who had incredible years. And what does that mean for Washington State and their careers, because of where they're in it, and all the pressure of what should I do? Washington State was this for me, but these opportunities may never come around again. Like, if I know better than anybody, like, the NFL is the worst odds of anything for anybody, right? It's 1% of the 1% of the 1%. 27,000 that's ever played in the NFL, ever in the 100 years of football. That is crazy to think of that number. And so I never can begrudge anybody for doing anything to better their life and get to play football to boot. We just grew up in a different era around what loyalty meant was a different type of thing because it wasn't free agency then. So again, long story short for your answer is I try to ground them like you did me that day when I was about to call my first game.
I remember that day like it was yesterday. I'm curious for you where you will watch the Heisman, if you will. And then I love the image of your dad being 48 while you were there. There's going to be a bunch of parents observing it. There's going to be parents there. I'd be curious your advice to the parents of athletes whose childs may have on their whiteboard or being told by a coach recruiting them that they can eventually find their way to New York City.
I mean, some of the things Coach Price told me, like, I hadn't done the research. I just bought it. I trusted him. And so I think a lot of times is when you are a high school kid, you're looking for a coach to change. I didn't have the best of luck with coaches in high school. And then one came along my senior year for basketball. And he changed my optics of what a coach was supposed to be and how they could make me better. And it changed my life because then that's the way I went about the recruiting process and looked at, and when Mike Price showed up, same thing. Terry Donahue was another one of them that was recruiting me at the time, who was just absolutely would have been a perfect fit. And so, you find that fit, find that trust. And parents, you out there, you're going through it, don't make it bigger than it is. Just enjoy it with your kid, because that's what my dad did. Like, he never needed a famous football playing son. He loved to get to watch his son play. And so for him to cut loose a little bit, because I never really saw him cut loose, right? He was always the parent, the three boys, and the taking care of the family and everything like that. So it was just, I don't know. I always look forward to the hugs after the game. He didn't say anything. We could just look at each other and know that I could have done something better, and we would just hug. That's all. And that's what that night was, kind of like this collective hug that him and I had been doing, because he was the one that would get me up in the morning and drive me to the field house to shoot hoops, have to make a certain amount of 3-pointers and free throws before I went to homeroom. He didn't come in with me and watch me do it. He was the one that got me up and drove me there. Yeah. He was never that overbearing dad. He was just a supportive one. And so that's what the kids need at this time. They're in New York. Just want to support. They win, lose, draw. Proud of you. What an amazing accomplishment. Let's keep having a lot of fun together and enjoying this.
I love it. So do you watch it? Will you watch it this weekend?
Probably not. I don't watch a lot of TV, like honest to God TV right now with a 1-year-old and a 7-year-old. It's a lot of, it's a lot of dragons. It's a lot of ninjas, a lot of those things right now. So we'll see. I mean, I want to see who wins, of course. I think it's Genty. That's who I think deserves it. At the end of the day, again, I'm of the mindset of the situation of where a player's at. You take Genty off that Boise State team, they are not in the college football playoff. They are not where they're at. And I think that's incredibly an important piece to this decision making. I'd love to see a Boise State Bronc carry that Heisman home. I think that'd be pretty special.
Oh, well, this has been really special. Thank you for the time, and congrats on the studio, and congrats on the new year with so many unique things. You got a new show. You just finished up the CW. You're on your way to Orlando with the WWE, I believe, with your boy. So you got a lot of cool stuff going on, man. And you've always meant a lot to me. I've always cherished our car drive at Cal, the little conversations we have on the side. And you're just a dear friend, man. And I appreciate all your support and guidance throughout my life as well.
Yeah, well, you're meaningful to me too, buddy. Like I said, in a world where you get going so fast with everything that's going on, kids, the job, you've been working in this business, trying to, navigate it this last year, realizing how the optics are of what West Coast football was and what's next, to then be able to pause and breathe, Something as simple as that. People don't get it. Something as simple as that is somebody just texting you right before you're about to go and do your first game, and you're nervous as hell, and the text comes across, and all of a sudden you just stop, look down at your feet, and you stop vibrating for a moment. You're free. And then to have, little Guy Haberman next to you, he's always pretty frantic about everything. So he allows you to stay pretty calm and relaxed. So you are exactly the same for me. We are dads about the same age of kids now too, with the things we're going. I think it's pretty cool, the people you meet along this journey in life that have a hand in changing it and making it better. So thank you too, buddy.
Love it. All right. Well, there it is. Ryan Leaf. Maybe we'll do one of these in Bali in a couple of years. We'll do it live. Have some fun. But in the meantime, thank you. And everybody check out everything Ryan's doing. All of his shows and content will be in our show notes as well. Thanks, man. Appreciate you.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Joe.
It's the Afterglow. That was Ryan Leaf, always brought to you by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. It's Heisman week. He was a Heisman finalist. He is in a fascinating story, and he's one of redemption. Jim, there was a lot of takeaways I'm sure you had. There's definitely one big one that I had. I'm curious where you netted out after producing this conversation with Ryan Leaf.
Yeah, I take notes during, all these interviews, obviously, just to kind of like think about like, oh, what would be good to put on, on social media and all the rest of that stuff. And this, I honestly had probably two of my favorite stories that we've done in the 40 whatever podcasts that we've done since we started the show. The first with him and his dad at the Heisman, his dad just getting lost and all of a sudden him finding him again with all the Heisman winners. Like that is just what was so heartwarming. And then to turn that to later in the interview, the conversation with his dad about the college football, Hall of Fame, and Ryan telling his dad that he didn't think he was, he would never get in because of, the morality part of things, and his dad telling him, not yet, not yet. Like those two words just cut right through me. And it was cool because, obviously to some people, like they probably only know Ryan Leaf as the guy that was the number 2 draft pick of the Chargers, and it didn't work out. And then everything that's happened to him since, like he talked about in the episode, winding up in prison. But to be able to listen to him and the perspective that he has on things was really powerful.
Yeah, I think to me, Ryan's just an incredible human to talk to. He and I have been friends, as we referenced, for a long time now. I think it was him when he references laying down in bed every night and laying next to his wife and being like, I love this bed. Right? Or when he's on the golf course and his buddies are saying, oh man, 5 hours we got to walk. And he's like, whoa, like, and when he talked about, laying on a steel bed for 3 years, and I just imagined him like crawling into his, I'm sure, extremely comfortable bed now. I just thought that was really powerful. And I think for all of us, like here we are in a time where it's easy to complain, right? It's really cool that the head coach of Minnesota, PJ Fleck, he always talks about BCD, blame, complain, and deflect. Like not allowed, no BCD, right? We've applied that in our house now. And you just think about the perspective that if you complained right now, or if I complained right now and said, hey dude, like, can you imagine being in prison though? Or if you're like, God, my pillow sucks. I was like, can you imagine sleeping in prison right now? Like those are the things that hit me really hard because everybody's tired. We've all had a long year in our own respective rights. And it's like, whoa. Take a beat. And I love that about Ryan. I know he offers it up to so many young athletes, locker rooms, businesses, corporations, humans. And he's doing it in a bunch of different ways. So that was the big one for me, man. And I look forward to spend more time with Ryan Leaf for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. There it is. There's our episode. It's Heisman week. It's also Portapalooza. We're going to bring on Brandon Huffman later on this week as well. He's all things recruiting. Remember, it was signing day a week ago, so we'll make sure we get all caught up to speed on that. Before you know it, Jim and I are going to have to repack our winter coats, and we'll find our way to New York City for this weekend's Heisman Trophy. My vote is done. We will talk about that on our next episode as well. In the meantime, share this with a friend, and make sure you go to yoption.com. If you're looking to gift somebody something this holiday season, gift them a subscription to this newsletter, this podcast, this content. Now, we appreciate all the support and love along the way. We pour into it. We love doing it. And yes, we will take a couple days off, but we also feel as though we are just hitting our stride. So that's Jim. I'm Yogi. Happy Heisman week. Thank you, Ryan Leaf. Peace.